Greetings everybody, I hope you're doing well. In previous video we talked about Azure ATP and how it works basically under the hood, but in today's video it is part 2 of the Azure ATP. We're going to talk about the ATP deployment and how we can simply deploy it in our environment and let it secure our environment. And let's do not waste the time and let's jump into the video and see how we can configure it. So the installation process and deployment of Azure ATP is not quite hard. Again, we go through the Azure ATP portal and then we authenticate ourselves using the global administrator. Type the email and also the password of the global administrator, and then we will head into the Azure ATP portal. The very first thing to do in order to use the Azure ATP portal, Azure ATP, is to create an instance. This instance, we can say that is considered like a workplace. So you just click on the create in order to create your very first instance of Azure ATP. Once it is done, you will face another page, and in that page you need to configure the credential for connecting to your Active Directory forest. By clicking on it, you will present it into the page, and that you need to type the username and credential for connecting to your Active Directory forest. So in this case, we're going to simply type the domain administrator, the password dedicated to it, and also the domain name. In this case, the domain name is Tintin. We're going to type all the information and then we click on save. Once it is done, the directory service configuration is done. The next thing is basically installation of the sensors. If you go through the sensor tab, you will see that you'll be able to download all the sensors related to your Azure ATP. By clicking on the download button, the sensor will be downloaded. So it's just going to take a couple of seconds for Azure ATP sensor to be downloaded. We're just going to save it somewhere so we can find it much faster. And yeah, and after that, what you have to do is to copy all the sensors that you downloaded through your Azure ATP portal, and then paste it on your DC, because we need to install the sensor on our domain controllers. Again, the installation process of this sensor is not quite complicated. You just have to type the access key, and then your domain controller will be linked to Azure ATP instance that you just created. By right-clicking and choosing Run as Administrator, you need to install the Azure ATP sensor. If you remember that we talked about the different sensors, we had a standard sensor and also we had a standalone sensor. In this case, because we're running on a VM machine and also we don't have the ability to configure port mirroring, we're just going to select sensor. This is that we can select. And the next part, we just have to copy the access key, which can be copied from the Azure ATP portal, and then type it there, or paste it in this case, and then click next, and that's all. The sensor will be installed on your domain controller. Don't forget that if you want to have a clear view of all events happening on your Active Directory environment, you need to install this sensor on all domain controller. So in that case, we can say that all domain controllers need to have access to ATP portal on port 443 This is not very best practice for many of us to having direct internet connection on our domain controller, but this is just a test, so we can safely ignore this fact. Once it is installed, we can verify that on services. If it is completely installed, we can see that Azure ATP service is installed on domain controller. So we're just gonna sort it out, and then you can see that Azure ATP is installed. In this case, we also have the Azure password protection installed on our domain controller. So as you can see, that is also installed. So that's the installation. This is fairly easy with no problem. And once this is installed, you can go through the Azure ATP portal. And if you go through the sensors page, we can see that Azure ATP detected the sensor that we installed on our domain controller. In this case, the DC name is DC1, and then as you can see, this is in the running state, and we can say that this DC is talking to Azure ATP, and Azure ATP is capturing all the events and things happening on the DC. So if you go through the exclusion page, you can see that all the tasks that's being monitored by Azure ATP, we can say examples of running Mimikatz, someone trying to generate and passing another ticket, a golden ticket, mechanism, man-in-the-middle attacks, NTLM tampering, and things like that. You can simply, if you find something like false alarm, you can consider that as exclusion and type that here. And also we have Honey token. Honey token is basically just like honeypots that we can create an admin account and then put the admin account into Honey token, and we'd see if someone trying to hijack through the account or not. The notification can be configured by using the notification tab, like mail notification or scheduling reports. We can generate reports and send the report by the Azure ATP in weekly manner, monthly basis. And if something is detected, basically you're going to see that directly in Azure ATP Portal. Since we just install the sensor on our domain controller, we can see that nothing is happening. But if we try to pass someone's ticket to someone else to access another server, that will be exactly trigger the Azure ATP, and it will be logged into Azure ATP Portal. So basically we can say you have nothing to do to configure Azure ATP. It's all done by Azure itself. It will generate, it will monitor all the logs in Active Directory. It will find the suspicious events, and it will be logged into Azure ATP. And in that case, you can have scheduled reports and send those reports in to the mail of the manager or someone in your prefer. Also, we can have Windows Defender ATP next to Windows Azure ATP. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. This was just the installation and how to deploy Azure ATP. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe to my videos for future videos. Have fun.